Hey there, my merry hanksters, and welcome to another edition of Redneck Moments, Poetry, and whatever else I feel like doing at the time. Today's episode is brought to you by Sawzall Tequila. If it burns or it feels scratchy going down, don't drink that stuff. Get yourself a bottle of Sawzall. A few limes, and you got yourself a party. Oh. So today, I got something I gotta get off my chest, I guess. I got myself a message from my good friend, Clay Funderburg. He said, "Hank, won't you get yourself a bottle of Rebel Yell," which I'm sorry, but I was in a tequila mood today, Clay. "And won't you talk about the Duke boys? Because they were just a couple good old boys, not meaning any harm, just making their way the best way they knew how." And I thought about that for quite a while, and I realized that Clay's right. And me being where I'm from, and me having the past and the family that I have, I do need to talk about this. And started feeling a little riled up about it, and luckily my son, River J, he said, "Won't we go out on the boat, get on the water?" And I think that was a good idea, because it does calm me out here. And son, River, a father could not be more proud of his son. Thank you for being who you are, boy. I love you. Now down to the gist of it all, I guess. Now it's the battle flag, the hot subject right now. Now some of you may or may not know that I'm an Arkansan, Arkansas born and raised. And our flag is the Confederate flag. And I was surrounded by it my whole life. And I watched the Dukes of Hazzard my whole life. And not once did I ever think, "Hey, my black friend Odell's coming over. I should probably turn this off." That never crossed my mind. What did cross my mind was, boy, I hope Odell gets here before the commercial break so he can see Daisy Duke's short shorts or her bikini when she jumps in that Jeep and peels off. Now, I think I knew that as a child because my great-grandfather Lee, God rest his soul, he did time for running shine out of the Ozarks. Oh! And did time in Leavenworth Federal Prison for not paying taxes on that shine. And that is exactly why I knew as a kid what the Duke boys were all about. They needed that fast car because my granddaddy had a slow pickup, and that's why he got in trouble. And that flag on top of that car, that flag's to represent we're taking care of our own without the government's help. So stay out of our business. It's a rebellion. It's about being a rebel. Now, folks want to make it about other things, and I've given that some thought, and so I want to kind of paint you a broad picture, or say what I think this is all coming from. And before I launch into this, I know what some of you all are going to say. What the heck do you know about Catholic guilt and cognitive dissonance? Well, I was married to a woman for 13 years who was a daughter of an excommunicated Catholic priest. So I know a little bit about Catholic guilt. And my mama, she is a licensed clinical psychologist, so I know just a little bit about cognitive dissonance. So here's the picture I want to paint you. You got yourself a Birkenstock wearing, state job having, Prius driving, bleeding heart liberal, gets up in the morning, turns on the NPR, makes herself a big old pot of shade-grown, organic, free trade, pooped out of a lemur on top of some sort of Peruvian mountain coffee, and then gets in her little Prius, which on the back says, "Coexist" on one side and "I don't shop at the Walmart" on the other, and she heads off to the farmer's market. And as she's listening to Howard Zinn talking about our country's founding is pretty similar to original sin, a good old boy in a jacked up 4x drives by blaring "Country Boy Will Survive" and waving the flag. waving the Confederate battle flag. And her head explodes because she's thinking that's a hate crime. And I would call 911 if the police weren't a bunch of racist gun-packing people just like that boy with the flag. And she thinks about this all the way until she gets to the farmer's market and decides, I guess I need to go down and get myself a marching protesting permit just to show how much I dislike that flag. And when she parks her car, she parks right on next to a Mini Cooper. Shiny red with the Union Jack flag painted right on the top, and her jaw drops. Now, this is an educated woman. Do you think her jaw's dropping because she realizes the history of the British Empire? No. That's not why her jaw drops. And that's why the cognitive dissonance comes in. Instead of thinking about what she was taught about how they colonized and they oppressed people for over 300 years, that's not what she thinks about. What she thinks about are those shaggy-haired British boys coming over here and singing that rock and roll and making her feel just giddy all over. Which, it's a whole nother topic, but, that was just Mississippi Delta blues taken overseas, whitewashed, and sold back to us while those gentlemen were down south trying to make a living playing that music. But that's what I'm talking about. Cognitive dissonance. You can't hold two beliefs. You have to drop one. And just like she thinks of her past, and that's why she's okay with the British flag, you got to give that same allowance to the Southerners who also have different thoughts and different beliefs when it comes to that flag because of their past. So, there you have it. There's this guilt, this Catholic guilt over slavery, which I get. But our country has tried hard to let that go. And just as we accept every other nationality and every other flag that comes into this country, I believe that we should also give that same allowance to Southern folks. And on a personal note, talking about cars with flags painted on them, I want to say this. Bubba Watson, if you're watching this, shame on you. Because if you didn't want a General Lee, you shouldn't have. You should have just sold it instead of neutered it. So right here, right now, I put a hex both on your golf game and your wife's cooking. Jinx, hooty do on you. And as far as me and my friends are concerned, you are not a Southern gentleman. You are a tanned Yankee with a twang, and you might as well do like Bruce Jenner and make the full transition. Braden Watson or whatever you want to call yourself. But I digress. Let me end this video by saying this. If you're a neighbor, let me just take one last drink before I go into this last thing. Wow! But if your neighbor or somebody in your community is flying a Confederate flag, give them a knock on the door and say, hey, sorry to bother you, but my friend Hank says that you flying that flag is to say to folks that you believe in guns, God, and the government staying out of your business. Is that true? I bet they'll say, yeah, that's pretty darn accurate. Would you like to come in for some sweet tea and some smoked brisket? And when you're sitting there drinking your sweet tea and they're fixing you up a plate of that brisket, I say you wet your whistle really good and you fess up. And you say, I gotta make a confession to you, neighbor. This whole time I thought that flag meant to you that you were about having slaves and teaching white power in Sunday school. Sorry about that. Yeah. Love thy neighbor. Come together as fellow Americans. We are all one. And if you want to fight, if you're itching for a fight, defend this country from threats both foreign and domestic. But don't fight each other. United we stand, but divided we fall, y'all. That's all I got to say about that. Stay sexy, y'all.